Welcome back to another episode of Next Level Fishing. Today we're going to talk about a bait that I truly love. It's a technique and a bait that I've used to cash more checks than anything else that I can think of. You can use it in dirty water, clear water, rocks, wood, weeds. I mean, there's really always a time and a place for it. And because of that, I have one on top of my deck and rigged up ready to go in pretty much every tournament I fish throughout the year. It may not be something that I use throughout the entire day, but I always find that there's like one or two casts that I need to make with it if it's not a primary technique for that tournament. And specifically what I'm talking about is the swim jig. You know, the swim jig's gotten a lot of notoriety over the last several years. I think it's a lot more common than it used to be. I feel like it's something that really kind of developed in my neck of the woods, around the upper Mississippi River area. Tom Mansour is kind of known for being the godfather of the swim jig. But, you know, so around here, it's always been a very common technique. I think it's gotten a lot more notoriety now around the country, and especially in areas like Florida, or if you've got areas with weed, it seems to definitely be a player. The Potomac River, it's a big bait out there. Brian Schmidt definitely has done real well with it. But there's still a lot of areas in the country where I don't feel like people have a swim jig tied on that frequently. And, you know, I can tell you some of my best finishes have been on a swim jig in areas that you wouldn't expect to throw it. You know, in like Grand Lake, I had a high top 20 finish there. You know, I think I was in the top 10 after the first couple days. I think every one of the fish I caught was on a swim jig. And it's not a technique that you hear about frequently there, but there's always a time and a place for a swim jig. There are lots of different versions of it now, but in my opinion, the best head that you can have is just a straight bullet style head that's, you know, got roughly a 30-degree line tie. You don't want something that's too parallel to the hook shank, but you don't want anything that's closer to like a 45-degree or a 90-degree, because then you start getting hung up on weeds, or, you know, just everything that you run the bait into. When it hits it, it'll just pull up and get snagged much more frequently. It doesn't come through the weeds as well. So I think most people would say roughly a 30-degree line tie is the angle that you want. And I find that the bullet head just comes through vegetation and, you know, wood just extremely well. So that's what I prefer. You know, I started throwing this bait, I mean, probably roughly 20 years ago, and I tied all of my own swim jigs. I poured all of my own swim jigs just with a do-it mold, and then I hand tied all the skirts on it. Today I found that dirty jig swim jigs are pretty much, you know, every bit as good as what I was making, and therefore I just find it easier to go and to buy myself some dirty jigs. But there are a lot of other makers as well. You know, if I had to pick one other swim jig that I liked other than dirty jigs, the Brovary Baits swim jig, which is also made here in Wisconsin, is an excellent bait. Lethal Weapons got a very good one as well. And they've all got the same style bullet head. And that's really the key. You know, I see a lot of other jigs that are called swim jigs by other companies, and I find that the head on them are much more like casting jig type heads, and I don't think they'll come through the water nearly as well. At least I haven't found that they do. I'm sure there are applications for those jigs that really work well, but in this case, I recommend a bullet shaped head. So what I want to talk about are the trailer choices for a swim jig. As you can see on this one, I've got just a boot tail. This is a Berkley Power Swimmer. This is one of my go-tos. I'll throw anything from a 3.3, which is what this is, really up to like a 4.8 size. In that case, I'll probably cut the top portion of the swim bait off, and what I'm looking for is just a bigger tail. And I think the like all around a boot tail is a really good trailer to use because it really mimics bait fish better than most of the other baits. I like to throw a boot tail when I'm specifically fishing in areas that are full of shad and, you know, maybe have some grass as well, because it comes through the grass pretty good. But what I'm really looking to do with this bait is mimic shad. So if you've got like a shad spawn going on, a boot tail is a great presentation. If you're fishing around docks, if you're fishing around floats, you know, isolated laydowns, the boot tail is a really good bait to go with in that presentation or in those scenarios. Now, what, you know, there are guys like John Cox lately who have been throwing, having a lot of success on swim jigs recently, and he's been throwing the Maxscent Meaty chunk, which I'm threading on right now. And, you know, this is kind of where that whole Alabama shake comes in, where you see guys that are just popping the rod tip, trying to keep the bait real high. And a reason they're throwing a chunk style bait, and they're rigging it so that the bait is parallel to the ground, the flat side is parallel, is so that the bait will continue to hover when you pop it. You know, the width of that meaty chunk as it comes through the water is really trying to keep the bait staying up high in the water column. And that's the kind of the whole point to that Alabama shake, is they're popping it rapidly to get that bait to kind of dance right on the surface. And when done properly, it almost stays, you know, right in place. And that's where the chunk style trailer is so important, because it just has that water, the water displacement kind of comes under it, forcing the bait up. And then when you pop it, the legs almost act as a keel and a backstop, where it almost wants to just kind of keep the bait right where it's at. And that's why you'll find that the chunk is a great style bait for a swim jig. But I feel like that's a pretty specific presentation. You're looking, you're really looking for either a shad spawn, or if you're fishing like bluegill beds, it's really good for fishing around bluegill beds. Or if you've just got an isolated target and you want to keep your bait in the strike zone for a longer period of time. And that's when you'll see that chunk style trailer really, really shine. So my third trailer, and really my favorite trailer, all around trailer, is the Berkley Deal. And this is kind of what I would consider to be the third category of trailers. And that is more of your creature style, multiple appendages, you know, lots of flapper arms. And what I love about the Berkley Deal, more so than most other baits with the appendages, well, one, the shape is great. The flapper arms really mimic a tail really well. They're not too big, not too long. It fits the shad profile. But more importantly, these flappers don't kick perfectly. They are not always consistently flapping. I'll find that they, you know, they'll kind of hit each other, so they'll be flapping really good, and then one will stop, the other will keep flapping, then they both start up, and then, you know, both stop, and they just kind of really have a very erratic action. And you know, I think anytime you have an erratic action, that's always one of the best triggering things that you can do to generate bites. And I just find that the Berkley Deal has significantly more of that erratic flapping action and generates a lot of bites because of it. So, in a nutshell, you know, I feel like this is a really good bait for all presentations. It's a good shad mimicking bait. It comes through grass great. It's just really good. You can use it for everything. Like, I feel like this, if I had to pick one trailer, this Berkley deal would be the best one, across the board. There are, as I mentioned, definite scenarios where I feel like, just a boot tail outperforms, and as well as a chunk style outperforms. But in general, if I had one go-to, it would be the Berkley deal. So, those are the three that I really like. I know there's a lot of other style baits out there, but I'm just kind of breaking down all of the trailers into three categories. And these are the three that are really my go-tos and have caught a lot of money for me, or caught a lot of fish, which have turned into a lot of money. So, if you've got some that you really like that you think I need to try, please leave some comments. I'd love to look into it. I'm always trying different trailers. And, as I mentioned, this is definitely, probably my favorite bait to have on. If I could only have one bait rigged all year, I would pick a swim jig because I think it's the most versatile. So I appreciate everyone listening. Hopefully this information was useful to you. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and stay tuned for some more good tips. Thanks.